So speaking of the budget, my first guest tonight has taken a very close look at the governor's spending plan, and then yesterday he issued a warning that as much as $4 billion in expected revenue might actually not come through in the end. He is, of course, Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, and he is joining us from New York City tonight. Comptroller, thanks so much for your time.
Good to be with you again, Liz.
And it is always good to see you. So when we first talked to you after Andrew Cuomo's budget address, you said, sounds good, but I need to see the details. Then subsequently, now you have seen the details, and you've said that this starts the state on the correct path to long-term budget balance, but there's a big hole, and you're concerned about that.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to emphasize that the governor has laid out a framework for us to achieve budget balance not only for the coming fiscal year, but long-term, to correct the great challenge that we've had and our past inability to, on a long-term basis, align our recurring spending with our recurring revenue. The risk, and we identified a number of risks, but one of the key areas of risk is that some of the savings that this budget plan is built around are still to be determined. We have the Medicaid task force, the Medicaid redesign group. We have other task force looking at mandate relief that will impact on local governments and other discussions about state operations, facilities closure, possibilities, labor savings. These are items that are still to be determined. So in effect, we have in the budget placeholders that we believe account for about $4 billion. So we know the Medicaid team is supposed to come up with their final proposal recommendations by March 1st. That needs to stay on track, needs to stay on time. They need to produce a specific document that could then be incorporated into the final budget document.
This is actually a pretty unusual way of going about budgeting. I mean, I don't recall having seen budgets actually put together this way by an executive before. It is frustrating state lawmakers to no end because it's difficult for them to make a decision and their own recommendations when they're not exactly certain what the governor has proposed on the front end. Also, there's a possibility that the savings that he is recommending or counting on don't occur, and then doesn't it pose a problem? You either have to fill it with revenue or you have to cut somewhere else.
Well, we've often seen in the past when there have been attempts to implement cost savings, it's often hard to do in the first year of when you're trying to achieve it. But, you know, the old ways of doing things, they weren't working so well either. It's why we have this ongoing structural gap. So I think that the governor deserves credit because what he's done, he's put in effect a placeholder. He's set a target for spending. And if you look at the totality of those parameters, it's a budget that would hold together if those spending targets are met. And he's taken key stakeholders. In the case of Medicaid, folks involved with the hospital industry, some of the union leadership that's involved with the healthcare industry, key legislators, the chairs of the health committee to be involved. So it's not that he's saying we're never going to have the detail. He's saying, let me bring around the table the folks who work with this on a regular basis, the stakeholders who would comment favorably or not on specific proposals, as they've done in the past, make them part of the process to come up with the way that we're going to meet the spending target that I've set. So I think we need to give this approach a chance to work, but we're not too far from March 1st. My worry would be, what if that Medicaid team does not come up with a consensus report? Because if they do, I think it'll be relatively easy then for everyone to see what the approach is and it can be adopted. My worry is, what if they don't produce the plan that the governor is expecting? So we need to keep that on track.
Comptroller, actually, so they have made some recommendations that they've posted online, but you bring up a good point, because if they don't, it says in the governor's budget that the state health commissioner would be unilaterally empowered to make the cuts himself, and that is something that state lawmakers, and you used to be a state lawmaker, so you understand, feel a little bit upset about, because they feel like there should be, the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. That's how the budget process works, not we empower the state health commissioner to sort of just cut whatever he wants.
Well, but in fairness, I think the concern is more than legislators. If you're a hospital and you're providing health care and you're part of the Medicaid program, this is really, the key part of how the state spends health care dollars. You need to know what services are covered, what is the reimbursement level. There'll be a lot of unknowns if you have the current law, simply expire or not be extended, and you don't have in place a new framework within which providers will know how to have health care covered. So there's good reason to say all right, if we're not going to do it the way we've done it before, how exactly are we going to do it? And you know, the other concern obviously would be if you have an increase in caseload, what would be the impact in terms of those expenses?
Sure.
So you need to define how you're going to spend the money and on what services.
You also make an interesting point that I think is really germane, because we're hearing a lot about the millionaire's tax and a fight over whether or not it's going to be extended. You note that there's uncertain revenue that is in this budget, including, for example, yet again, we see Andrew Cuomo, like David Paterson before him, like other governors before him, relying on the likelihood of collecting cigarettes that are sold on Indian land. The Indian tribes are not so fast, is what they say, right?
Yeah.
This has been a legal battle, but you note PIT collections, that's the personal income tax collection, that was the millionaire's tax, $1 billion less than expected. Everybody's fighting over this thing, over reinstating it. It's not even generating the money it was supposed to.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind the PIT number we're talking about was the total PIT, not just the surcharge. But your point is correct. Division of Budget has repeatedly had expectations on personal income tax revenue that have not been realized. They've had to adjust their figure down. So, so that is a risk, and that's obviously tied to the fragile economy that we're in right now, where the recovery is very, very slow. That's what we do with our controls report. We identify the risks that everybody needs to see are out there. As you know, we've had concern about how this current budget year is going to end. I have a concern that we're not going to meet the revenue expectations, and Division of Budget is saying right now, if they fall short, they're going to control that by controlling spending. That still remains to be seen. Right now, this budget plan is built on an assumption that this current budget year will end in balance. I'm just not so sure. We've seen so much weakness with business tax collections as well as personal income tax coming in shorter than expected. So we're in a time of risk, and we need to understand that going into it. This is not an exact science. The best estimates need to be made, and I think the governor has put together a responsible plan. I particularly like the fact that when you get to the out years, you see a significant reduction in the out-year gaps that we've had for too long. So, I think we need to give credit that it is a roadmap. We need to fill in the details. There needs to be a thoughtful discussion of what those details are going to be, and it needs to be done by April 1st. We can't have a budget that goes past April 1st. We have to show that the state's in business and meeting deadlines.
Comptroller, just to be clear, though, are you suggesting that it's possible that on top of the $10 billion budget gap that the governor and the legislature have to close in the coming fiscal year, that they could actually end this fiscal year with maybe a multi-million-dollar, with an M, budget gap, as we have had so many times in the past, and on top of that have to deal with that hole? Is that what you're saying?
Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I estimated it could approach $1 billion. We had said that. Now, again, the Division of Budget has lowered their projections in terms of personal income tax revenue, and any gap they believe they can handle by controlling spending. That remains to be seen. We're going to have our report on the Wall Street bonuses coming out very shortly. Will there be some better news there than expected that will give us some more personal income tax revenue? We're still, that's an unknown question right now. We're still in a situation where really week by week, if not on a daily basis, we need to look very closely at what the spending is and what the revenue is. And we're going to be in that mode for the foreseeable future.
Can you tell me another interesting point in your report here? The executive continues to use debt, although in a more limited way than previous years, to narrow the general fund gap. I thought there wasn't borrowing to close the gap in this budget.
Certainly compared to past years, it is a minor part. There's some pay-as-you-go capital spending that instead is going to be bonded out. I think it was about $200 million. It is certainly a dramatic departure from the reliance on debt of the past, but there is some debt. There is some debt that's in here.
Okay, so to say that this is a no debt, no new taxes budget is not exactly true.
Well, what we try to do with the Controller's Office is be precise about identifying the numbers as we see them. I don't want to characterize one way or the other. The clear message I want to leave you with is that this budget does not utilize the kinds of gimmicks and budget sleight of hand to the degree that it had been used in the past. So this budget is different. And in terms of temporary and non-recurring revenue sources, there are still some of that included in this budget, but much less than in the past. And as you move to the out years, you see that the governor has laid out a plan to really move away from those kind of one-shots. So there's much in here to be positive about, and you know, the risks are there as we identify them, and the legislature needs to do its job to look at the numbers carefully and represent the interests of the people who elect them. Obviously, a lot of folks are going to be debating the specifics, and you can make some changes within a budget. You know, those are the policy choices that the legislature makes in conjunction with the governor. But in terms of the parameters, the governor has set a good path for us to reverse the kind of negative budget situation that we've had in the past, to restore us to a condition of balance and have that happen on an ongoing basis. That's a goal that I think we should all share.
I just want to, for 1 minute, switch gears, if you would indulge me, because we had the story that we broke last night regarding NARAL and some alleged improprieties there. And I'd like to get your take on that, in part because, and obviously from a political standpoint, it has absolutely nothing to do with anybody in elected office, and apparently just to do with one person, Kelly Conlon, NARAL's former president. But you know her, you know the major role that she has played in Democratic politics. NARAL, of course, endorsed you and did a little bit of a attack on your GOP opponent, Harry Wilson, regarding choice issues. I just wanted to get your reaction to that story.
Well, you know, I only know, you know, what I heard of the story, so I think there's probably a lot more to, you know, to be learned, and sure. I don't want to assume. I don't want to assume any allegations that are just reported are true. Having been in public life for a long time, you know, I always prefer to look at the facts rather than you know, one story or an allegation. So you know, I wouldn't have any comment beyond that.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli.
Thanks,
It's
Liz.
always good to talk to you. We'll be talking.
And if I want to, next interview in the studio. That's what we want.
Yes. Well, that is my preference too. We'll be seeing you soon.
Good. Great. Thanks.